one person brought a bike back, and I think it was maybe a 4-year-old was like, is this where the bikes go? And like pointing into the bike hanger. And the kiddo was like, I think you need more bikes. And I was like, I agree. I'm working on making that happen.
Welcome to That's Her Problem, the podcast where women who lead, connect, and rewrite the rules get real about building community. The challenges we face aren't always the same as everyone else's. But here's the truth. A city that's good for women is good for everyone. I'm your host, Patty Weens. Good day, my dear followers, and greetings from my Zen balcony, where I'm wearing my Tegan Phillips t-shirt called Bike Rack. Get it? Bike Rack. Well, it's been an exciting time around here at That's Her Problem HQ. And wow, that sounds so fancy, am I right? I have a couple of things to share with you, and the reasons I'm a couple of days late delivering this week's episode are, number one, no, it wasn't because of Taylor Swift's engagement. I know that that's what you were thinking, though that kind of did decrease my productivity a little bit for sure. But really, it was because I have unreasonable deadlines for myself, and I would have had to sacrifice quantity for quality. So, number two is I was also hosting Ali Stewart, the bicycle mayor of Toronto, and guest on episode 8 of this podcast, and we cycled 110 kilometers over 2 days. We were not training for anything. We were just riding around Winnipeg and then riding around to Birds Hill and back and talking about life, bike lanes, and everything in between. We had some folks join us for the rides on Saturday, which was lovely, and thank you to all who came and made Ali feel the love of the bike community here in Winnipeg. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, wow, the bike people there are really so sweet, you are correct. We also hosted a quick little bike ride with Angie Smith, who was here with her daughters, Evie and Abby from Iowa City. And we also met up with Lisa and Seb, who are traveling across Canada. They're from France. So if you're thinking that Winnipeg is simply a place to pass through, you might be correct, but I would dare you to take just a couple of days to stop and come ride your bikes with us. Just let me know that you're coming, and we're going to make sure that we keep you busy. Now, on other news, I'm proud to share that I have the first official sponsor for my podcast, and it's something and someone that I truly believe in. It's Shifter's new online course, The Ultimate Guide to Bike Commuting and Urban Cycling. This course gives you all the knowledge you need to make bikes a bigger part of your daily life. It's created by Kaylin Klingbeil and Tom Babin. And this is so fitting because Tom's YouTube channel was the catalyst for me going from casual bike rider to full out winter cyclist, year-round commuter. And it's a great channel if you're just thinking of adding just a little bit more bike to your life. Chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you already ride your bike a lot. And you might know someone who's thinking of making the transition from just riding their bikes on the weekend to being a full-time bike commuter. I'm telling you, this is exactly what they need. Plus, from now to the end of September, you get 20% off the course when you enter the coupon code Back to School at checkout. Find the link to the course in the show notes and on my website at pattybikes.com/podcast. When you use the link provided by me, I make a commission, which is how I'm able to pay for the cost of producing this podcast that you're loving so much. Today's episode is fascinating. Laura Mitchell is so smart, passionate, and someone I feel like I've known my whole life, even though we've never met in person. She'll be giving you some stats about her project, and if you listen to the end of the episode, you get the updated numbers that she sent to me just this week. And if you listen to the end, you'll hear Sarah's sparkling minute again, because she loves me and she sends me voice memos. Did you know that you can also send me voice memos? Yes, you can. Just follow the link in the show notes or go to my website at pattybikes.com/podcast. If you want to support me on Patreon, I would really appreciate it. Your support helps me keep my costs low and keep delivering this great content to you. Just go to pattybikes.com/podcast and click on the Patreon link from there. Now, back to Laura.
Laura Mitchell, welcome to That's Her Problem.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. I don't know if you know this, but you're part of my origin story. When I first started riding my bike in winter, I took to the old Twitter to ask for advice, and you were one of the people who reached out to me and made me feel like I could do it. There were
That's
a lot of
amazing. I had
men.
no idea.
Yes, it was back in, I think winter, January of 2023. I still have all the screenshots. It's kind of cool. There were a lot of men in the online bike space, especially in the winter space, as you know, and definitely not a lot of people who rode their bikes in what you and I call real winter. So
Yes.
even though you're much younger than me, I feel like I wasn't alone out there, and that maybe I just might be able to do it, you know? So it's
That's
kind of
incredible. I'm
cool.
so glad we have that in common. Winter biking is my favorite. So I am always glad to bring more folks into the fold and talk gear and strategy and all those things.
One of the things that really struck me was that when I asked, what is your biggest obstacle? Nobody would ever say the cold.
Yep, absolutely. Because you can solve for that. You can buy the gear that you need to solve for that. It's the infrastructure and the cleared paths and lighting and all those things.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like winter was the catalyst really for my advocacy work and my origin story. Was that the same for you, or what is your bike origin
I think
story?
it notched me up a bit for sure. Once I moved to Minneapolis, the infrastructure here was better than what I had experienced in Denver. And so it allowed me to bike year round for more trips, which just had me open my eyes to so much of what was wonderful about bike commuting and riding a bike for regular trips, and also what was so challenging about it. So it's not what my origin story is. I can talk about that in a second, but definitely leveled me up and had me even more excited to work on safe streets and advocacy. And my origin story is back in 2014. I lived in Denver and heard about this fun event that you could do called 30 Days of Biking, which actually someone here in Minneapolis, who I'm now friends with, Patrick, had started. And it's an idea of riding your bike every day for 30 days. And he picked the month of April, which is not the greatest month as far as easy weather in Minneapolis to bike in, but it's a perfect month if you want to have an opportunity to see all the sorts of weather. You get snow, you get rain, you get sleet, you get warmer days, all, overcast days, colder days, you get everything. And so I was living in Denver at the time, was not riding my bike for hardly anything, but I thought that was kind of a fun challenge to try. So I did it and just used it for little trips here and there. But since I had the motivation of needing to get on my bike every single day, I slowly started thinking about, well, what if I just ride my bike to work? Like maybe that would be a fun thing to do. And the cost of parking was a lot compared to my salary and my student loans at the time. I worked in downtown Denver and lived a few miles south. And so once I saw how much money I could save on parking my car just by using my bike instead, I was hooked. I was like, I can use this money to pay my student loans. I can use this money to treat myself to lunch. Like, why would I want to store my old crappy car for like $10 to $15 a day? This feels like an easy solution. And then my wife and I had our first kid, and I sort of took a break from riding a bike for a little while. And then once our oldest was old enough to be in a burly, I started riding around with a kid, and all of the challenges that I had come across when I was riding by myself, suddenly I was seeing through new eyes, because I was not just trying to keep myself alive, I was trying to keep my kid alive. And I remember being so frustrated because I was like, I accepted this in the past, that this is just the way that it needs to be, but I don't want this for my kid. Is there a solution? And that was just a very deep rabbit hole of me learning about all sorts of, infrastructure and curb cuts and protected bike lanes and elevated bike lanes. And I just went super, super deep learning and learning and learning. And then my wife and I moved our family to Minneapolis in 2019 with, at the time, two kids, our 9-month-old and our, at the time, 3-year-old. And we attended an event actually right behind our house, on the street right behind our house, called Open Streets, which was hosted by an organization that I wasn't super familiar with at the time called Our Streets. It's a nonprofit. And they closed down the street to cars and open it up to people walking, biking, rolling. There's vendors, there's food trucks, there's community events, musicians, artists, everything. And they strategically host these events on streets that are not safe for people outside of cars, generally speaking. And so that was the case for this street behind my home called Nicolette. It's one of the highest injury streets in the city. And even though we'd only been here for a few months at the time, I had been panicked so many times trying to take my 3-year-old's hand as we crossed the street. And so experiencing that in a different way when there weren't any cars involved really opened my eyes to what was possible and had me eager to get involved more locally. So that had me volunteering with Our Streets. They were working on a campaign for a protected bike lane in my neighborhood, so I volunteered for that. I joined a active transportation committee for the county, and then eventually applied and joined the Our Streets board of directors. And I've actually served as the president of the board of directors for the last 2.5 years. Learned so much from our talented staff and incredible community members. Our Streets is just the way that we do our work really centers community voices. And so I've learned so much from that work. That then brought me to applying for and running a couple safe routes to school grants at my kids' school, including we tested out a school street where we shut down a specific block to car traffic and again opened it up to kids and made it so much safer and more fun. And then recently founded the Minneapolis Cargo Bike Library.
And all you wanted to do was save money on parking.
All I wanted to do was save money on parking to pay my student loans and treat myself to lunch every once in a while.
I always say that to people. We don't want to say that biking is for people who can't afford to drive a car. You don't want to say that.
Mhm.
But the quickest way for you to feel the change of riding a bike is in your pocket. So I always say to
Mhm.
people, hey, you want to save money? Ride your bike. We don't need to tell them that they're joining the cult and that
Yes.
pretty soon they're going to be riding to City Hall using, holding signs and all
Yep.
that. But but that change of going from I'm saving money to all of a sudden I feel really good. I
Mhm.
I feel mentally better. Then all of a sudden I'm feeling physically better. Then all of a sudden my community is expanding. I'm meeting the people who are in the closed or the open streets behind my house.
Mhm.
I'm talking to them more. My circle is expanding. My life is completely changed. And I'm holding signs at City Hall.
Yes, exactly. And when we moved from Denver to Minneapolis, we had two cars. And once we arrived here and were able to benefit from both increased walkability, because the neighborhood we chose here compared to the one we were in Denver is just more dense and we had more within walking distance. Our second car had the battery die so many times because we weren't using it that we finally were like, maybe it's time to think about selling our car. And so we did and got a cargo bike, which then just like that was the end of all things. Now I'm just obsessed with cargo bikes. But that saved us so much money. We were able, both from the cargo bike itself was so much cheaper than the car we sold, but then ongoing costs, saving on insurance and gas and maintenance was incredibly helpful for my family when we had two kids in childcare. Like I honestly don't know how we would have managed that if we had two cars that we were paying for at the same time of two kids in daycare. So it was a huge cost saving for us.
We all think that these are costs that are just part of life. I have people
Mhm.
saying this all the time. This is just part of life, a mortgage and car payments, a mortgage and car payments. But do they have to be? No, I don't think so. Well, the
Mm-mm.
math is about 12,000, at least in Canadian dollars, a year. Do
Yep.
you feel like it's about the same in US dollars? Well, then that's like
Oh,
50
absolutely.
Canadian, you know,
Hmm.
when you
Yeah.
think about the cost savings of giving up at least one vehicle. And we're not
Hmm.
saying all the time, but choose those trips wisely and maybe you can go down
Hmm.
to just one. and
Exactly.
afford that life that you want. I love your posts about taking your kids to school on your cargo bike, riding everywhere. And then you grab your other bike and you go run your errands. And we
Well,
know that Minneapolis has probably one of the greatest bike networks in the United States. Sarah Goodyear was telling me how great it was to be able to be there. In episode 1, she went on and on about how great your streets are. Do you think that kind of network is really facilitating more use?
yes. So I grew up in the suburbs here, but have only been in Minneapolis proper since 2019. And when we got our cargo bike in late 2020, people would stop me when I was locking up my bike to be like, tell me about this. What is this? Like the cargo bikes were such a unique thing. And since then, we have added, I don't know how many more miles of protected bike infrastructure, but a lot in my neighborhood in particular, such that now I go outside and I see a cargo bike like on almost every block. People do not stop me anymore to ask me about my bike because they're everywhere. And it's not just cargo bikes. People of all are riding all sorts of bikes, regular bikes, recumbent bikes, tandem bikes, cargo bikes, and the numbers, I don't have the concrete data. I think we're still in the process of doing some more data collection at the city level of what our like bicycle and pedestrian counts are, but just anecdotally, I feel like the numbers are so much higher now. Thankfully, like thanks to our huge network that is not perfect. I always want to tell people like, yes, we technically are ranked like near the top or at the top, depending on which ranking you look at for the United States for bike infrastructure, but there's still a long ways to go. There's still a lot of gaps and just painted door zone bike lanes that need to be upgraded. But the city has really put a lot of effort into upgrading things as much as possible, protecting things as much as possible, and having that connected, protected network that also is maintained through the winter is enabling so many more people to bike for more trips.
And were you part of the advocacy?
Not the first couple years that I lived here, but then once I joined the board at Our Streets and joined the Active Transportation Committee for the county, I became very involved. I don't want to take credit for anything, but certainly there's a huge uh, group of folks locally and a number of nonprofits that work on active transportation advocacy. And so we have a lot of people pushing for a lot of things, and a lot of folks long before I ever got here made huge efforts and were incredibly successful in advocating for some of the things that we've been able to do. And we also have the benefit of in the late 1800s, early 1900s, we actually had some really incredible bike infrastructure around our lakes. And we have been lucky enough through our park board and other efforts to actually be able to maintain those. So a lot of cities either didn't have that bike infrastructure to start, or all of it got paved over and made into streets. And we have sort of the backbone of our network is those 100-plus-year-old bike lanes that we then were able to build off of and make them not just recreational paths, but also bike lanes that actually get us to destinations and go through more dense areas of the city to make them really useful.
And you're only 8 hours away. I need to cross the
Yes.
border and go see
Yes.
this. Check it out.
Likewise. I think I need to cross the border more than you do, but yes, you should come visit
Yeah.
at some point.
Come on down. We'll come get you.
Yes.
And we'll hide you in our basement.
Yes.
I feel like, sorry. Let me just take a moment here. I was going to ask you something and then I got excited about going to get you at the border. Yes, that finished bike network, I feel like it's a thing that is really hard for our city councilors to understand or to care enough to be able to put that as a priority. How were you able to do it? Are they receptive to this, or are they always pushing for more car infrastructure?
Not all of them are receptive, but we are still lucky where we're at right now. Our city council president is a year-round bike commuter and a huge advocate for bike lanes. And there's a number of other city council reps who are bike commuters and transit users and pedestrians. And so again, folks who came long before I did really work to ensure that our city has a complete streets policy that lays out how our public works department is supposed to prioritize people walking, biking, rolling, and taking transit, and then people taking cars. We're not perfect at that. Not every project that gets done is doing that to a T, but we have that in place. We have a Vision Zero team in place. We have a lot of things in place that help ensure that basically any time a street comes up for reconstruction, we consider, is this a street that needs a protected bike lane? And a really good example of that is Bryant Avenue South, which is just about half a mile away from my house, was a super traditional, pretty residential, but goes through some dense areas of a few neighborhoods. Two-way street with parking on both sides and sidewalks on both sides. And that street got reconstructed. A lot of people said, like, there's not enough traffic here to require a protected bike lane. Like, we can just repave it basically and keep the design as is. We didn't do that. We changed it to a one-way street that is one lane for cars with one side of parking. So we took away half of the parking and created a sidewalk level two-way bike lane and then sidewalks on both sides. And that connects to our Midtown Greenway, which is an east-west old like rail corridor that was changed into an active transportation for people walking, biking, and rolling. So Bryant does connect to that and goes north south. And Bryant Avenue South is my favorite, like one of my favorite places in the entire city, because it's one of those areas where, since it connects to other infrastructure, you see people of all ages and abilities using that bike lane. Even though a lot of folks were like, oh, it's not necessary. It was necessary. We made the bold step of reconstructing that street in a way that was going to meet more people's needs. And now it is such a treasure. Like, every home and apartment that goes up for sale on that street highlights the fact that it's on Bryant Avenue South. And it's just beloved. And so, like, that's an example of, street comes up for reconstruction. We put together the plans. There's a lot of community involvement, but like at our core, we're really trying to work to make things better for everyone.
And when you say we, are you talking about our streets?
Yeah, everybody here who cares about safe streets, which includes our streets, Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota, Move Minnesota. We work with the Sierra Club. There's a number of nonprofits that are working to advocate for these changes, and then just a whole lot of passionate people who live here, who volunteer and get involved and testify at all the opportunities, attend all these community meetings. So it takes all of us.
That's great. What we always talk about grassroots movement, and it really takes a whole lot of grass to really push for that. It's not just one loud group always asking for the same thing. It's a group of different people coming together and telling city council, look, there's more than just a few of us. There are lots of us. I agree with you that there has been an increase in ridership. Our city data does not support this truth, but I have
Mhm.
noticed, and I know my people. You know how you know your commuters, the people that you
Mhm.
always see on your commute, and there's a lot of people that I don't recognize, and it makes me so excited whenever I see. There's this one kid now who's like he's in a construction outfit. You can tell he's got his little lunch, and he's a young guy, and I'm like, you're new. You're
Yes.
riding you probably
Hi,
just
welcome.
graduated. Yeah. And you're riding your bike to work, and it's very exciting. And I think that the more people that do that, we just need to harness all those people who are enjoying the bike, right?
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
wh- you are working on something really exciting right now too, and it's called the Minneapolis Cargo Bike Lending Library. I remember when you started it not too long ago, and I was like, "How is this gonna work? And she's lending these things for free. Can you please tell us more?"
Yes. So this is a long time in the works, a problem I've been trying to solve for a very long time, and was lucky to finally piece together the partnerships that we needed to make it happen. And we opened on April 1st. And so the Minneapolis Cargo Bike Library is a partnership between Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota, Cycle Hoop, which is a company that makes like bike hangers, secure bike shelters that can be locked and keep bikes out of the elements, and then my neighborhood association, who I live down the alley from. And so we pieced together all those partnerships. I offered to volunteer my time to both set it up and then to manage the check-in, check-out process and help with like basic bike maintenance. And Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota was able to get us our first two electric cargo bikes. And Cycle Hoop got us the hanger. The neighborhood association gave us a parking space to put the hanger, which, that's one of the biggest things sometimes is like, can you get someone,
Space.
convince someone to give you a car parking space? And we were able to make that happen, which was huge. And the idea is that we are working to support folks to be able to test out these cargo bikes with a very low barrier to entry. And so the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota has this really incredible program called the e-bike commuter program that they basically folded the library into. And the idea behind that is they partner with employers and give them a fleet of electric bikes, not cargo bikes, but just straightforward electric bikes that then employees can take to support their commute to and from work. And so this sort of fit into that of like, let's give folks access to these bikes that can be expensive, can be hard to store, folks can be unsure that a lot of folks are curious about cargo bikes, but feel like they need to actually test them out in a longer
Well, and
term
they're
than just a quick.
expensive to just to just buy.
They can be incredibly expensive. And so people want to have an opportunity to like see what they're all about before making a choice of whether they want to buy one or not. And then there's also people who may not actually need a cargo bike in their life day to day, but have a need for one for a specific use case scenario. And so we opened in April. A unique thing about our program is we partner with the Bicycle Alliance in Minnesota, and you have access to their basically bike curriculum that supports folks to have the knowledge skills that support them to be safe when they're riding a bike. So we go through like the ABC quick check of how do you go over your bike to make sure it doesn't have any mechanical issues, just really high level. I'm not trying to make everyone into a bike mechanic in a quick session, but the basics. And then going through, basics around how to ride safely on the street and where in the lane you should ride and how to handle various situations there, how to fit a helmet, how to lock up a bike, talking through some of the unique situations about cargo bikes, like the fact that they're very heavy. You need to make sure you have time to stop and watch out for pedestrians and those sorts of things. And so we have folks go through this in person right now orientation, and then they have access to log into our website and they can go on there and book a bike. And booking a bike, they go through the checkout process, but it's $0. And then they meet me at the bike hangar on Saturdays, pick up their bike, and then off they go with their bike. They bring it to their home, whether it's an apartment or a single family home with a garage. We don't have a requirement that people have an indoor place to store it because we really don't want that to be a barrier to folks either. And so folks are able to have the bike for about 5.5 days, so almost a week, and then they bring it back to me on Thursdays. And we have had 60 folks have gone through the orientation, and we call them our members. And we've had 30 so far 1-week-long rentals, and our members collectively have ridden over 1,000 miles since April on our cargo bikes. Obviously, not every single one of those trips is replacing a car trip, because it could be some of them are trips that folks might have taken public transit for, but like anecdotally, the reports that I get from folks when they return the bikes are that they are replacing a ton of car trips, commuting to work, getting their kids to school, getting groceries, taking the dog to the vet. They're finding all sorts of use cases to use these bikes and finding so much joy along the way. And so a number of folks do end up buying their own cargo bikes, which is huge, because then you can think about not only did they replace car trip miles during their rental, but now who knows how many thousands of miles they might be riding their own cargo bike, which was enabled by them being able to have this opportunity to actually test it out for a longer period of time. And for others, it's just, it helped meet a need that they had at a specific moment in time. And so we had someone who was an artist at a local art festival, and she wanted to get her art from South Minneapolis to North Minneapolis and didn't have access to a car. She was able to rent one of our cargo bikes and had just such a joyful experience transporting all of her art to and from the festival. So it's been a joy.
Getting them hooked.
Mm-hmm.
How many bikes do you have then? Did you say 2?
We started with 2, and then we have had the really fantastic problem that I didn't quite anticipate, which is that bike companies want to give us bikes. And so,
No.
yeah, because for them, it's an obvious, give folks access to this bike. And if they like it, they might go on to purchase that bike. And so selling bikes is not the goal of the cargo bike library, but it's an obvious potential, outcome of folks being able to have access to bikes. And so almost every major bike company has reached out to me. I haven't done any outreach, but they are finding out about us, which is just incredible, and have reached out to me. And I'm actually having to hold off because we're trying to make sure that we scale sustainably. Right now, again, it's just me managing the check-in, check-out process. I have a couple volunteers that I'm working to onboard, but we don't want to grow too big, too fast, and want to make sure that we have sort of our systems figured out as far as how we get the bikes fixed when problems come up, and just communication structures. And so all that to say, we have 4 bikes right now. We have several more bikes that we might be getting this year. And then the plans are that next year we would expand to a few more sites and be able to accept a few more bikes.
So how is this sustainable? How do are you getting paid?
I am
Is
not
what I
getting
need to
paid.
know.
It's completely volunteer. In fact, I have spent a lot of my own money for little things like keychains and minor repairs here and there. The Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota has stepped in and they are covering all of the bike insurance on the bikes because that's a big concern. And we actually did have a theft early on in things that we want to protect ourselves against. So that's a piece that we've wanted to have in place that Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota is paying for. They also are helping to cover any major like repairs that come up on our bikes, which is a huge relief off of me. And so it's really just me dedicating my time, volunteering my time to communicate with our renters, to manage the website, manage the social media. The plan would be for us, we're right now starting to work on a grant application for a local grant that we're going to apply for. And our hope is that we can build into that some money to pay for folks to do some of the things that I'm doing, whether it's me or someone else handling some of those logistics, making sure we have a good pot of money set aside for mechanical stuff, for storage, for all those sorts of things. And so we've considered this our pilot year and really just trying to see what works, what doesn't, what our pain points are, and then solve for that next year. And hopefully with the support of some additional grant funding to make that happen.
So we are recording this in the middle of June, and the show is coming out at the end of August. I'd love to have an update from you by then so that we can tell the listeners, how many
Yes.
miles people have ridden and how many bikes you're at. And one thing that I'm really curious to know, and you probably will only know this anecdotally as well, is have you turned any car people into bike people?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on what you count as a car person. There definitely are, like early on in the process, a lot of the folks who joined our orientations were pretty savvy with bikes already, but they weren't yet savvy with cargo bikes. But the
Mhm.
last few orientations that we've had, we've started to get more into just like the average community member. And so there's a number of folks who maybe haven't ridden a bike in years who are like, maybe a cargo bike would fit into my life in a unique way. And so they're getting on a bike again. And so we're seeing that happen. We're also, one myth that I like to dispel is it's not just families with young kids. We are getting older folks, younger folks, people who have no children, people who have dogs who don't have dogs. Like every sort of person is joining our orientations, which is so fun to me because all of our bikes are different. So right now there's 4 bikes and all of them are a different type of bike. And part of the goal is to make sure that we are supporting folks to be able to test out different bikes that might meet their needs. And so something that meets one person's need is not necessarily going to meet another's, and they can test out various bikes throughout the cargo bike library to figure out what works for them. And not all the bikes are set up for kids. Some of them are like specifically set up just for hauling groceries or like actual cargo objects that are not human. So that's been a joy to see too, is that we're just meeting more needs than just families.
That's great. Are they electric or are they're
Yeah,
all electric?
when we started, I actually had a non-electric cargo bike that someone donated to me that then essentially donated to the cargo bike library. And it got rented one time. There was zero interest in it. People were like, that's cool, but I'm curious about the electric cargo bike. So we actually pulled that one out of, it's not in the cargo bike library anymore. So now all of our bikes are electric.
The electric bike really is the gateway to car independence.
Hmm.
I wrote a book actually called That'll Never Work Here, and in the
Hmm.
process of editing, one of the editors suggested that I take out the chapter about e-bikes because it really doesn't have anything to do with how active transportation works. And I said, actually, I can tell you're not a bike person
Yes.
because the e-bike is the transformation. It is the remover of the barriers.
Yes. And that was my experience for my own family, which is part of what helped inspire me want to start the library, to help others experience this, is we got our cargo bike. And the next summer, our kids were at 2 different locations for their summer programs. And I was putting 20 miles a day on hauling kids to and from various like summer programs. I'm pretty like in pretty decent shape, but I would never have hauled almost 100 pounds of children for 20 miles if I had had to power that bike completely by myself. But with a little bit of e-assist, off I went, got lots of exercise, had lots of fun, and didn't have to work too hard unless I wanted to.
I really hope it just keeps going like crazy and you are able to get paid for it so that you can just get all the bikes. And I'm really looking forward to seeing. what you come up with, and maybe there is something that we can do here too. I know that we've tried to do something, but I'm not sure that we had the people power to get
Yep.
it going. And
Yeah.
that's
And
really important too.
that's been the biggest thing is like have a weirdo like me who's willing to spend like all of your free time to get it started, find the right partnerships, and then hopefully find a way to make it more sustainable. Because my wife also will say this. The plan is not for me to be running the check-in, check-out process manually and like the way that we're doing it right now forevermore. We're already working on some potential apps that could automate and allow people to get access to bikes without a person needing to be there. But I have to say that part of the benefit of the program is, at least for the checkout process, people have so many questions for me about how the bike works. And I think that helps me being able to be like, here's the throttle, here's the e-assist, here's how you switch gears, here's how you get the kickstand on and off, here's what you need to be concerned about as far as tipping or those sorts of things. Being able to give those tips to someone before they roll off with a cargo bike, I think enables them to feel more comfortable and have a safer and better experience. And so there's things, even as we plan for next year, if we're able to get more grant funding, that I'm like, I actually want to keep in place if we can, having that human connection and component to people taking the bikes. It may just be that we can streamline some of the other processes and the check-in process and those sorts of things.
You just want to talk about bikes with people.
I do. I do. The
You know,
Thursdays and Saturdays are my favorite because I just get to like geek out with people about bikes.
yeah, I was thinking about this. Having an app would be more of a commodity, but having a person is a community.
Hmm.
That's the
Exactly.
key difference right there. You're getting them hooked, and you get to hear that
Hmm.
feedback too when they bring it
Yes.
back and they're so excited about their stories. That's the best
Hmm.
part about bike life, is hearing people's stories.
Yeah. And I'm finding more bike people and maybe even making more bike people. And one of my favorite times is when people who do have kids bring the bike back with their children so I can see the joy and excitement and hear the questions of the kids. And one person brought a bike back and I think it was maybe a 4-year-old was like, is this where the bikes go? And like pointing into the bike hanger. And the kiddo was like, I think you need more bikes. And I was like, I agree. I'm working on making that happen.
Yes, kid, never lose that spirit. That's what you
Uh-huh.
say all the time. I think you need more bikes.
Yes.
I made a video recently saying something like, come to the bike side. It's great here.
Hmm.
All you
Yes.
need is one bike.
Exactly.
Just kidding. Let's not talk about that. What would you say then to someone who's thinking, oh, I'd really like to start something like that here? What are the
Mhm.
steps that you think are actionable?
I will say, first of all, this idea of starting a bike library was not mine. I learned from lots of folks out there who have been doing this much longer than me. And there's a bike library out in the Boston area called Community Pedal Power. And they actually have they've written down the steps of you need at least one bike, you need at least one lock, you need a place to store the bike. You should think about bike insurance, but it's not necessarily a must have depending on what your situation is. And so they really laid out all of the steps, which I found incredibly helpful, and hopefully I can help add to sort of the documentation of things like this. But I would say it is really that simple, depending on how big you want to go. Have a bike, have a lock, think through any liability stuff around, do you want to have bike insurance? Do you want to have a waiver that folks sign? I was lucky, given the partnership with Bicycle Alliance in Minnesota, that they have a waiver that I was able to use for the program that just helps to protect both Bike Men and myself if there were anything to come up around the bikes. And then think through what the process is for folks to actually check the bike in and out. I chose to go the route of having a nice website that my wife designed for us that has sort of booking availability, but it does not need to be that complicated. You literally could just start with loaning out your bike to people that you know and do it through word of mouth. You could set up a Google form and have folks contact you when they want to rent a bike, and then you just reach out to them via email or text message to arrange it. There's so many different ways that you could arrange this. And I think just starting, like my biggest advice is but start really small, evaluate what works and what doesn't, and then grow from there.
Thank you so much. This is very exciting. I have a friend who has like 14 bikes. She knows who she is, and she's not listening because she doesn't listen to podcasts, but she could be doing this, getting everyone hooked.
for anyone who might be curious about doing this in a way that they don't have to think through some of all of those logistics with the waiver and the insurance, there is a website called friendwitha.com that allows you to do paid rentals. You could set the paid rental really, really low and actually just have your bike on there and rent it out to folks through that website, which I think is a huge resource too.
Very cool. We're going to have to
Mhm.
link that in the show notes for sure. So, one of the things that I like to talk about is, well, I started this podcast because I wanted an excuse to talk to awesome women. And every time I talk to someone, I find that we have so many great stories to tell. And I want to invite you to the table. I want you to have a seat at this table, but I want to set the table myself. What does it look like to you to have a seat at the table where you are?
Mhm. I think to me, it means like having the ability to speak proactively and honestly about my needs and to actually feel like I'm being heard or to know that I'm being heard. It means not fighting after the fact to try to correct or fix decisions and mistakes that were made because everyone's needs, including mine, were not being considered. I think it means having like my needs and preferences, my safety and comfort, and my joy considered along with everyone else's, not just as an afterthought or if we have enough time or space or money or whatever, maybe we'll get to thinking about your needs, but like genuinely being a part of the conversation and being able to elevate those needs early on.
And do you feel like you are having a seat at the table right now?
I feel like I plugged into it. Like I sat down at a table that was already really big and already really well set, and I found my place and have worked to create space for other people to join us too, which I think is the place I want to be. It's special.
Awesome. The next section in the show is called the Thank You, Amy section. So, was there a time in your life when you were underestimated and you turned that into an opportunity to thrive and even excel?
So you told me this question was coming, and so I've actually been giving this a lot of thought, and I'm confident that people have underestimated me hundreds, if not thousands of times throughout my life. But to be honest, I actually can't think of a time where someone overtly or explicitly underestimated me, like to my face in a way that I knew about. And some of this, as I was reflecting, I'm sure has to do with the privilege that I have as a white person, as someone who's had access to a high level of education. I've also spent my entire adult life in really progressive cities, Minneapolis and Denver. And my career has been spent in a majority woman field in public education. And I also think, like, as a queer person, sometimes people don't know what box to put me in. Like, my gender presentation is not feminine. I'm married to a woman. I'm a parent. I'm an educator. I'm not afraid to speak up about the problems that I see or to lean in to try to solve them. And so I think sometimes people are just confused and don't know what to think of me. Even in the advocacy spaces, the fact that I'm a parent is weird. Like, there's not that many parents in active transportation advocacy spaces. There's a growing number, there's more and more coming, but there's so many barriers for parents as far as finding the time and childcare and all those sorts of things. And so even in that like really concrete identity way, I'm kind of a weird one out. And so I haven't had to face a ton of that, but certainly I have countless examples of drivers underestimating me and treating me poorly when I'm like daring to exist as a pedestrian or someone on a bike. And I've shared with some folks that because I have the joy of being able to do winter biking, when I winter bike, I have so many layers on. I've got a helmet on, I've got goggles on, I've got, face coverings on. And I think when I'm fully bundled up, it's not obvious that I'm not a cis man. People might think that I'm a man and they treat me differently. And then the other 3 seasons of the year when I'm wearing like slightly tighter clothing, fewer layers, I have been treated so terribly just daring to exist outside of a car. So I think like in that way, maybe I've turned folks who are underestimating me or not allowing me to take up space into an opportunity to push back through my advocacy work, advocating for better infrastructure, supporting others to have the tools they need to be able to take up space, and to be safe and have joy as they move from place to place.
I appreciate that you said that too about winter, because it's true when you're on a bike in winter, you're not really sure who you are. You have so
Yeah.
many layers on. The kind of weather that we get is like, who is this? What is this person on the street? But I don't know. I find that I do get a lot of aggression in winter too, just
Mhm.
because people are so angry to have to deal with being in a car in winter. They're looking at
Yep.
me and going, you know what? Who do you think you are taking up this space when I should
Yep.
be the one in front of you?
Hmm.
But you're saying that you're winning people by confusing them because your presence,
Apparently.
they're not sure what to do with you. I love
Yep.
this. Maybe I need to be a little more confusing.
Yes.
Maybe
It's
that's an
working for me
advice.
so far.
That's great. Thank you so much. Well, I have some rapid fire questions for you. And the
Yes.
first one is, if you were a bicycle, what kind of bicycle would you be?
A cargo bike, obviously. Um,
But which
yes.
one? Would you
Right
be a
now,
bunch?
yeah, right now I would be a bunch bike. If you follow me on social media, you know I'm obsessed with my family's bunch bike. And the reason I'm obsessed with it is just so practical. It has a rain cover, it has a sun cover. My kids can put blankets on, they can eat their snacks, they can read. It is not a fast bike, which I am not a fast bike rider. That is not my style of riding. I just want to get from where I am to where I'm trying to go as safely and relatively quickly, but I'm not going at a fast speed. The bunch bike allows me to be really present with my family. Like the other night, we were going to dinner and we stopped at a bookstore. The kids got some new books, and my 6-year-old was in the bunch bike. And I was able to help my 6-year-old read as I was riding a bike because they were in front of me and I could see the words and was going slow enough and on protected bike lanes that it wasn't an issue if I had my eyes away from the street for a second or two. And so I think the other thing that I love about the bunch bike is it forces me to take up so much space. And I also have a horn on it. I have a really loud horn that I actually have on all of my e-bikes, but including on that one. And so if I do not use it around pedestrians or to people on bikes, but if a driver does something really scary, I love being able to use that horn and then have them look over and be like, whoa, I don't want that thing to hit my car because that's going to cause some damage.
Yes.
And so it's just so fun and practical and allows me to connect with my kids and my community and is lovely.
It's so funny. Every time I ask that question, people start describing their favorite bikes, and then they forget that the question was about themselves. And it really shows a love for yourself, how
Hmm.
much you love your bike. I love your bike too. I'm not sure
Yes.
if you know Sarah Bisbee from Edmonton.
No, I don't.
Her handle on social media is Mommy Pedals, and she has a
Oh,
bunch
yes.
bike. Yes,
Yes.
yes, you do know her.
She rides in very cold weather.
Oh, yes, she
Oh
does.
my
Yes, she
gosh.
does. And I had the privilege of meeting her in person, and she's a wonderful person. And she was one of the first bunch bikes in Canada because she said to Bunch, I
Hmm.
will store parts in my garage, right?
Yes.
But yes, her bike is beautiful. And I was like, the moment I have a garage, I will
Hmm.
have a bunch bike. It looks so cool.
It
And
is so
so what
fun.
it's saying to me is that you feel like you are sort of a very practical person who likes to take up space
Yes. And be in
and
community and with my kids and not go fast. I like to stop and smell the roses even when I'm on my bike.
Okay, funny fact. Today when I was coming around a corner, there was a woman on a bike stopped smelling wildflowers. And I'm like, dude, yeah, I almost hit you. But yes, this is why we ride bikes. I got it on my camera, so I can't wait to post it. It
Oh,
was
that's
so
so
cool. I was
fun.
like, you just made my day. The other
Yes.
time in winter, I came around the same corner and a guy was taking a picture of his bike propped up against a snowman. And I thought,
Oh,
you
that's so
love your
funny.
bike.
Uh-huh.
If we can
Absolutely.
only love our bikes, love ourselves as much as we love our bikes.
Exactly.
Second question is, what is your superpower?
I think storytelling, both through photos and written words. I was an English major in college and had planned to become a journalist. but I graduated during the Great Recession as print journalism was dying. And that had me very nervous about trying to go into journalism. So I made a last minute switch my senior year of college and became a teacher instead. But I think I've, in recent years, sort of returned to my love of writing and my love of photography and found a lot of joy in being able to capture what honestly are just like some really mundane examples of my day-to-day life and annoying things that bother me about, bike lane obstructions or whatever else, and being able to capture that, share it, and get those messages out. One of the things that I especially love is I grew up in the suburbs in a very car dependent place, and I did not think that the life that I'm living today was possible outside of a place like New York City because I didn't have models for that. And so part of what I think about sometimes when I'm grabbing photos and sharing things online is like, just show what life can be like so that if there are folks who might want that for themselves, they can at least know that it's possible. Now, do we have enough housing that's affordable enough in the places that are walkable, bikeable, and have enough transit? No, hopefully working on solving that problem too. But I also feel like the awareness and storytelling of just like what can life be like if you move around in a place where you don't have to be in a car for every single trip is something that I find really important and really fun and maybe is a superpower of mine.
And the bike plays a big part in that transformation of our spaces. I always
Yes.
say, yeah, okay, I talk about my bike too much, but the bike is the solution to many of these problems.
Yes,
The,
it is the biggest enabler. Like the infrastructure that we have in Minneapolis enabled me to feel like I could buy a bike and use a bike for the purposes that I use it for. But now that I have that, like the bike enables so much of a higher quality of life for me, for my kids, for my family, for my neighborhood, even for the folks who are not even riding a bike. Like the drivers, the folks who still drive for every trip in Minneapolis, which there are many of, they benefit from the fact that my family is not taking a car for every trip. And so it's good for everyone.
it really is. And that's what I think it would be really great to understand every time I talk about how the bike is a solution to every problem. People say, well, I can't ride a bike. And I'll say, yes, but if everyone that could would, you wouldn't be
Hmm.
stuck in traffic. You are traffic, right?
Exactly.
It's quite inspiring actually to hear that story because when you think about how much more you're able to write those stories because you're on a bike and not in a car, how much more
Hmm.
you're able to stop and take those pictures and create and share that experience because you are
Hmm.
not in a car. How many times are you riding your bike and you're thinking of, oh, this great idea, something I'm going to write today, something I'm
Yep.
going to share with someone, and that story really cannot happen in a car. I don't care what anybody says. You don't get that kind of inspiration.
Yes.
Wait, when you're inside, a living room on wheels.
Yeah, I get so stressed. We have a car and we use our car regularly, especially to visit family in the transit inaccessible suburbs. And I get so stressed out when I have to be in a car, both because I find that my mental health is better when I get to move my body. And so being stuck in a car for 30, 45 minutes at a time to get to family members in the suburbs stresses me out physically because I'm just like sitting still for so long. But then also, driving on highways and dealing with all the scary driving behaviors that folks have these days. Like I genuinely worry that we are going to get in a car crash and it's terrifying. It's not joyful, it's not fun, it's not connected, it's expensive. Not
Yes,
for
all
it.
those things. I always say that my parents live a long half-hour drive away and a short 1 hour ride,
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, the third question is, can you recommend a book by a female author?
I love When Driving Is Not an Option by Anna Zivarts.
Do you know that is going to have to be the book of the month club because I'm gonna have to read it. Anna
It's
Zieverts,
fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah, she came out. Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota brought her out for an e-bike policy summit that they had, I think in February. So I got to meet her briefly and chat with her, and she just her perspective and the research that she did for that was just really compelling. Even as someone who is so steeped in this, being able to not just see things in a on social media. Here's an idea. Here's an idea. Here's an idea. But sit with a book that has been so carefully written and considered. It was eye opening for me, and I think it's a really important thing for lots of folks to read.
Thank you so much for sharing. What is next for you? I mean, I feel like I know you are working on your lending library.
Mhm. Yeah, that's going to be the biggest thing. We have big plans. It's both the continue to run things, improve on processes for the remainder of this year, and then as much as it pains me to say, we are not planning to run the library through the winter just because we don't have studded tires for the bikes. The maintenance and challenges of trying to upkeep bikes that are going to be moved through winter is not something we feel like taking on this first year. And so I'm actually going to have a little bit of a hibernation and opportunity to focus on planning for next year over this winter. And so eager to continue to improve things throughout the rest of this year and then sort of close up shop as late into the season as we can. Certainly not like first snowfall, but we'll probably have to close up shop at some point, and then really work on creating plans for next year, hopefully getting some grant funding, continuing to spread the word and support folks, and just fill the city, the metro, the country, the world with cargo bikes.
Yes, let's. And how can we find you?
I have a website, which is my name, lauragmitchell.com. I'm on Blue Sky at Laura G. Mitchell. And I don't know,
Instagram?
lots of places online. I'm on
Yes,
Instagram, but it's a private account, but the Cargo Bike Library does have a public account on Instagram that you can follow as well.
that's great. Thank you so much. It was so great to have you, and it was so inspiring. And I can't wait. I feel like I have so much to learn from you. We're going to have to do this again. I am going to
Likewise.
have to come down and give you a hug in person. I
Yes.
feel like I've known you forever. Thank you for always being so encouraging, and thank you for the goggle advice. I love my
Yes.
goggles that you recommended, and for being such a shiny personality online, and for modeling what it looks like when a person wants to have car independence, even with little kids. So thank you for
Thank
being
you,
here
Patty.
today.
Thank you for having me. It was a joy.
I hope you were inspired by this conversation. Laura emailed me her new stats saying we are right at 3,000 miles ridden and up to 7 bikes, including 2 at a new second location within the city. So, do you feel inspired to start a bike library where you are? I've added Laura's resources to the show notes, and you can do some research and find out if it's something that you want to do. Thank you as always to my Patreon supporters, Michael, Andrew, Nikki, Halls Emporium, Tim, Lucas, Linda, Rod, Julia, David, Stephanie, Jason, Cassie, and Skitch and Jamie Truffin. Sign up for my newsletter so you can join our Discord group and participate in some fun things that we're going to be doing this September. Stay tuned. The next episode will drop in 2 weeks, so you have time to catch up. For now, that's our problem.
Hi, Patty. It's Sarah. I'm just catching up on episodes 11 and 12. I really enjoyed them, especially liked Caro and you discussing your suspicious and scheming agendas of trying to stay alive. And I really enjoyed listening to Yasmina. I think we all need to just be a bit more headstrong and tenacious like Yasmina, set a target and go for it, and then just expect the universe to fall in, because it seems like that's what's happening. So I'm definitely going to try and live that in my life. Thanks so much. I'm enjoying the podcast. Bye.